AWS and DevOps with Ratna. In this video, we are discussing about Docker storage. This is the agenda we are discussing in this video. How Docker stores data by default. When you create files inside a container, they are saved in a special writable layer on top of the container's base image, but this data is temporary. If the container is deleted, all the data inside it is lost. Each container has its own separate writable layer. You can't easily copy that data to your host system or another container. Docker storage mount options. We have 4 ways we can store the data: volumes mounts, bind mounts, tmpf mounts, named pipes. First one, volume mounts. Docker volumes are a way to store data used by containers, and they are managed by Docker itself. Volumes are useful because the data is kept safe even after the container is deleted. The data is saved on the host machine's file system, but you cannot access it directly like regular files. To work with the data, you must attach the volumes to a container. Trying to manually open or change the volume files from outside Docker may cause error or data corruption. Bind mounts. Bind mounts create a direct link between a host system path and a container, allowing access to files or directories stored anywhere on the host. Since they are not isolated by Docker, both non-Docker process on the host and container process can modify the mounted files simultaneously. Use bind mounts when you need to be able to access files from both the container and the host. tmpfs mounts. A tmpf mount stores files directly in the host machine's memory, ensuring the data is not returned to disk. This storage is ephemeral. The data is lost when the container is stopped or restarted, or when the host is rebooted. tmpf mounts do not persist data either on the Docker host or within the container's file system. These mounts are suitable for scenarios requiring temporary in-memory storage, such as caching intermediate data, handling sensitive information like credentials, or reducing disk I/O. Use tmpf mounts only when the data does not need to persist beyond the current container session. Another one, named pipes. Named pipes can be used for communication between the Docker host and a container. Common use cases is to run a third-party tool inside of a container and connect to the Docker Engine API using named pipe. First of all, we need to know what is Docker volume. Volumes are persistent storage mechanisms managed by the Docker daemon. You can create a volume explicitly using the Docker volume create a command, or Docker can create a volume during container or service creation. When you create a volume, it's stored within a directory on the Docker host. When you mount the volume into a container, this directory is what's mounted into the container. This is similar to the way that bind mounts work, except that the volumes are managed by Docker and are isolated from the core functionality of the host machine. Best for long-term storage databases and when you want to better performance. When to use Docker volumes? Volumes are the preferred mechanism for persisting data generated by and used by Docker containers. Volumes are completely managed by Docker. Volumes are a good choice for the following use cases. Volumes are easier to backup or migrate than bind mounts. You can manage volumes using Docker CLI commands or the Docker API. Volumes work on both Linux and Windows containers. Volumes can be more safely shared among multiple containers. New volumes can have their content pre-populated by a containers or build when your application requires high performance I/O. These are volumes when we are using for choose Disadvantage of Docker volumes. Volumes are not a good choice if you need to access the files from the host, as the volume is completely managed by Docker. Use bind mounts if you need to access files or directories from the both container and the host. The default directory of Docker is var lib docker here in the volumes. The path is, if you go check cd volumes, the path is var lib docker volumes. Docker volume commands. We can explain Docker volumes practically in this video. I will create next video, and also I will explain you how to use Docker volumes. These commands: Docker bind mounts. Bind mounts create a direct link between a host system path and a container, allowing access to files or directories stored anywhere on the host. Since they are not isolated by Docker, both non-Docker process on the host and container process can modify the mounted files simultaneously. Use bind mounts when you need to be able to access files from both the containers and the host. These are the bind mounts commands. Docker tmpf mounts. A tmpf mount stores files directly in the host machine's memory, ensuring the data is not returned to disk. This storage is ephemeral. The data is lost when the container is stopped or restarted, or when the host is rebooted. tmpf mounts do not persist data either on the Docker host or within the container's file system. These mounts are suitable for scenarios requiring temporary in-memory storage, such as caching intermediate data, handling sensitive information like credentials, or reducing disk I/O. Use tmpf mounts only when the data does not need to persist beyond the current container session. These are the Docker tmpf mount commands. These are the commands. And another one is named pipe mounts in Docker. A named pipe mounts allow a container to communication directly with the host system using a special communication channel called a named pipe. Unlike volumes or bind mounts, named pipes are not used to store files. They are used to send or receive data in real time between the container and the host. Named pipes are useful for inter-process communication (IPC), such as when a container needs to interact with the Docker engine API running on the host on Windows. For example, the Docker CLI inside a container can use a named pipe to control Docker on the host. This type of mount is suitable for real-time communication, not for data storage. Use named pipes only when your container needs to send commands or stream data live to or from the host system. These are main use of named pipe command. Named pipe mount: send commands from a container to the host, stream data in real time, enable IPC. This is the command. Thanks for watching. If you have any queries, please comment in comment section.